David Turner was no stranger to the ebb and flow of waterfront living. For 5 years, his small house in Coral Bay had been his sanctuary, a quiet refuge from the hectic rush of city life. Every weekend, he'd climb aboard Sea Whisper, his 30-foot sailboat, and lose himself in the rhythm of the waves, the salty breeze, the warm sun on his face, the gentle creak of the mast. It was freedom, pure and simple. But that Saturday morning, freedom felt miles away. He found the envelope tucked neatly under his doormat, its pristine white surface and bold black lettering instantly setting off alarms. Coral Bay HOA. Immediate action required. His pulse quickened as he tore it open, scanning the formal letter inside. The words were cold, uncompromising. Dear Mr. Turner, it has come to the board's attention that your boat, Sea Whisper, violates community guidelines regarding visible docked vessels. You are hereby ordered to remove your boat from the private dock within 10 days. Failure to comply will result in fines and potential removal of the vessel at your expense. David's fingers trembled as he read the final line again. Removal at his expense. That was a threat, plain and simple. But why? His boat had been docked exactly the same way since the day he moved in without issue. Across the bay, the docks gleamed with boats of every shape and size, some even larger and more conspicuous than Sea Whisper, yet none of their owners had received such a letter. A creeping sense of unease settled over him. Was this about the boat, or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? He walked down to the marina, past the manicured lawns and pristine sidewalks lined with neatly trimmed hedges. Neighbors waved as usual, smiling with the easy familiarity of a close community. But when David reached his dock, his eyes narrowed. His sailboat rocked gently against the pilings, innocent and untouched, yet it now felt like a target painted in neon. Across the water, Marcia Leland stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching him intently. She was the HOA president, known for her strict enforcement of rules and a reputation for no-nonsense leadership. But David suspected her methods sometimes went beyond fairness. 2 years ago, he had outbid her on a coveted lot right by the marina. Since then, the atmosphere between them had chilled. Marcia's cold smile was like a warning. This letter, it had her fingerprints all over it. David's mind raced. He pulled out the HOA bylaws on his phone and reread the sections on dock usage and visible boats. There was no clause about visible or aesthetic restrictions. The rules were clear and had never been challenged before. Had the board suddenly rewritten the rules just for him? That thought unsettled him. More troubling still, what did Marcia gain by pushing him out? David stood in the midday sun, gripping the envelope tightly as a plan began to form in his mind. This wasn't just about a boat anymore. It was about pride, justice, and the fight of his life. The clock was ticking. The following evening, David entered the HOA meeting room, a small community center packed tighter than usual. The air buzzed with tension, neighbors whispering in clusters, eyes flickering between him and Marcia Leland, the unyielding HOA president, perched at the front with her usual steely expression. David's heart hammered as he stepped up to the microphone. He cleared his throat, feeling the weight of dozens of pairs of eyes drilling into him. I'm here to understand why I was singled out, he began, voice steady despite the knot tightening in his chest. My boat has been docked here for years, just like many others. I checked the bylaws. There's nothing about visibility or aesthetic standards that apply to us. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded supportive. Others shifted uneasily. Marcia's lips curled into a thin smile. Mr. Turner, the board's decision was unanimous, she said crisply. Our community standards are evolving. What was acceptable before isn't anymore. We're committed to protecting property values and the neighborhood's appearance. Your boat is an eyesore to many residents. David's eyes narrowed. Then why haven't the other boats been targeted? Several neighbors have vessels docked far more visibly than mine. Marcia's gaze sharpened. Your case is different. There are factors you might not be aware of. The room fell silent, the cryptic tone stirring unease. Whispers swelled. David scanned the faces, some friendly, some guarded, others clearly uncomfortable. As the meeting dragged on, David realized the community was split in two. Some residents expressed outright support, praising his calm demeanor and fairness. Others seemed to side with Marcia, voicing vague concerns about maintaining standards and the future of Coral Bay. The atmosphere thickened with suspicion. Back outside, as the crowd dispersed, a few neighbors pulled David aside. One whispered nervously, "Be careful, David. This isn't just about your boat. Marcia's got her own agenda." Another offered a hesitant smile, but refused to say more. That night, David sat alone in his living room, turning over every detail in his mind. What could Marcia be hiding? Why had the board changed the rules without public notice? And why had they acted so swiftly and so harshly against him? His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." The warning was chilling, and it only fueled his determination. David knew this was no longer a simple neighborhood dispute. Something darker was at play, a power struggle threatening the fragile peace of Coral Bay. But he wasn't about to back down. His next step would be to uncover the truth, no matter what the cost. That night, David couldn't sleep. The warning text echoed in his mind like a sinister drumbeat. Who was watching him? Who wanted to scare him into silence? The answers lay somewhere beneath Coral Bay's serene surface. He was certain of it. Determined to find proof, David decided to start where the tension seemed thickest, inside the HOA's own files. The next morning, he visited the community center early, claiming he wanted to review meeting minutes and budget reports. Marcia reluctantly granted permission, her eyes cold and calculating as he stepped into the dusty, cluttered records room. Hours slipped by as David scanned pages, minutes filled with routine complaints, budgets for landscaping, and maintenance fees. Then, buried in a folder marked confidential, he found what he wasn't supposed to see: a series of encrypted emails between Marcia and several board members, hidden among innocuous-looking documents. With a few attempts, David decrypted the messages on his laptop. The content shocked him. The emails revealed a secret plan. The HOA board was preparing to sell the Marina land to a luxury resort developer, bypassing any resident vote. The new aesthetic standards were a smokescreen to pressure owners like David, whose docked boats cluttered prime real estate, into leaving quietly before the sale. Worse, there were hints of kickbacks and hush-money agreements between Marcia and unnamed investors. David's pulse raced as he read on. The boating restrictions weren't about beauty, they were about greed and betrayal. He closed the laptop abruptly, heart pounding. The peaceful, tight-knit community he loved was fracturing under a web of lies, and Marcia was at the center. But the risk was enormous. If Marcia caught wind that he'd uncovered this, the anonymous threats might escalate, and not just to warnings. David knew he needed allies, but trust was thin in Coral Bay now. Later that afternoon, as he stepped out to clear his head by the water, David noticed a black sedan idling suspiciously near the marina entrance. The tinted windows obscured the faces inside, but the car's presence felt deliberate, watchful. He felt a chill slide down his spine. The game had turned dangerous. Returning to his dock, David took a deep breath. His next move had to be careful. He needed undeniable proof and support before making any accusations public. But the clock was ticking. The 10-day deadline loomed closer. He reached for his phone and typed a message to Alina, the quiet HOA board member who had so far stayed neutral. If anyone could help him navigate this hidden storm, it was her. "Meet me tonight. I have something important to show you. We can't trust Marcia." His thumb hovered over the send button. This was no longer just about a boat. It was about saving Coral Bay, and maybe himself. Night had fallen over Coral Bay, but David's mind was wide awake, racing with possibilities and dangers. The meeting with Elena was set for 8 p.m. at a small cafe on the edge of town, an unassuming place where few knew them, perfect for hushed conversations. David arrived early, scanning the dimly lit room. When Elena slipped in quietly a few minutes later, her expression was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed worry. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, usually calm and reserved, but tonight she seemed burdened with a secret. I'm glad you asked to meet, Elena whispered, sliding into the seat across from him. I've been watching Marcia for months now. What you found? It's worse than you think. David nodded, pulling out a USB drive. These emails show she's planning to sell the Marina property without informing residents. She's manipulating the rules to scare owners like me off the docks. Elena's eyes flickered. You're right, and it's not just about the Marina. Marcia's been embezzling HOA funds, funneling money to offshore accounts. She's controlling the board with promises and threats. David swallowed hard. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Fear, intimidation, and loyalty to the status quo, Elena replied. But if this gets out, the community could implode. David's jaw tightened. I want to fight back, but the HOA already fined me, threatened to tow Sea Whisper, and now I'm getting warnings. Someone's watching me. Elena glanced around nervously. That's because they are. You need leverage, something they can't ignore. David's mind raced. Then an idea sparked. I control the Marina lease. What if I shut it down? The community depends on that Marina. Boats can't leave or dock without it. Elena's eyes widened. That would cripple them. But it could backfire. You'd be isolating yourself. I don't have a choice, David said firmly. If they want to push me out, I'll make them pay. They agreed to keep their alliance secret for now. As Elena left, she handed David a folder, documents proving Marcia's illegal financial moves. It was the ammunition he needed. Back at home, David composed a letter to the Marina board. He cited urgent safety inspections and privilege reassessment to justify temporarily suspending Marina access starting in 1 week. It was a bold move, a direct strike at the HOA's pocketbook and reputation. As the letter sent, David stared out over the water, heart pounding. He'd crossed a line, and Coral Bay was about to change forever. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Last warning. Back off, or this ends badly. David swallowed the lump in his throat, but refused to back down. This was a war, and he was ready to fight. The morning the Marina gates slammed shut, Coral Bay awoke to a wave of chaos. Word spread quickly. Marina access suspended indefinitely. For the community, the Marina wasn't just a convenience. It was the heart of their waterfront lives. Fishing boats, pleasure crafts, even small yachts were suddenly trapped behind locked gates. At the Marina entrance, frustrated owners gathered, shouting and pounding on the gate. David stood nearby, watching the storm he had unleashed with a heavy mix of satisfaction and apprehension. This wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was leverage, his only chance to force the HOA's hand. Marcia Leland stormed onto the scene mid-morning, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. David Turner, you're sabotaging the entire community. She yelled, her voice cutting through the cacophony. You'll regret this. But David stayed calm, meeting her glare with icy resolve. I'm simply using the tools I have to protect what's mine, and to make sure the board stops abusing their power. Marcia fired back with a threat. Hefty fines, lawsuits, and towing notices. But the tension had shifted. The neighbors, once divided, now faced a crisis together. Some blamed David for the lockdown. Others whispered about Marcia's greed. Lines blurred. In the days that followed, the community fractured under pressure. Fishing trips were cancelled. Boat club events postponed. The local cafe lost regulars who couldn't reach their vessels. Rumors flew like wildfire. At night, David found threatening notes slipped under his door. Stop playing games, and worse. Shadows lingered outside his home. Yet he refused to yield. Unexpectedly, Elena reached out again, this time with a hushed warning. Some board members are uneasy. You're shaking the foundation. Keep your guard up. David nodded. He was no longer just fighting for his boat. He was fighting to expose corruption and reclaim fairness for every neighbor. One evening, as David sat on his dock watching the sunset, a small group of residents approached cautiously. Among them was a middle-aged couple who spoke quietly but firmly. We want to help, the man said. We've seen things too. Things Marcia doesn't want out. David welcomed their support, sensing a turning tide. The battle for Coral Bay had grown beyond him. But with the community's fractures becoming cracks of resistance, David knew this was just the beginning. As night deepened, the Marina gates remained locked tight, symbols of a simmering war beneath the peaceful surface of Coral Bay. David barely slept that night. The Marina gates stood like a fortress between him and the rest of Coral Bay, and the silent war beneath the surface felt heavier than ever. Then, as dawn broke, a soft knock at his door shattered the stillness. Standing there was Elena, the quiet HOA board member no one really noticed, but whose presence now felt like a beacon in the dark. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice low and urgent as she stepped inside. "David," she began, closing the door behind her, "there's something you need to see. Something no one else in the community knows." She pulled out a thick folder stuffed with papers and photographs. "Marsha's corruption runs deeper than just the Marina deal. She's been embezzling HOA funds for years, money that was supposed to maintain our roads, utilities, even community safety." David scanned the documents, bank statements, forged invoices, and confidential emails tying Marsha to offshore accounts. His stomach tightened. The betrayal was staggering. Elena continued, "I've been gathering evidence quietly, afraid to confront her alone. But you've shaken the status quo, and now people are paying attention. We can't let Marsha destroy Coral Bay for her own gain." David nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "What can we do?" "We expose her, publicly, but carefully," Elena said. "If we move too fast, she'll cover her tracks or retaliate. We need proof, allies, and a plan." David glanced out the window. Across the bay, the once vibrant marina was eerily silent, the locked gates a stark reminder of what was at stake. "Elena, why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. She looked away for a moment, then met his gaze. "Because I believe in this community, and because sometimes the quiet ones have to be the loudest." As the day unfolded, David and Elena strategized. They reached out discreetly to a few trusted neighbors, residents who had voiced concerns but feared Marsha's wrath. Slowly, a network of allies began to form. But the threats hadn't stopped. That evening, David found his garden vandalized, his boat's name crudely scratched into the siding of his house, a chilling message that the battle was far from over. Yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, a flicker of hope grew. Coral Bay's undercurrent of tension was turning into a swell of resistance. With Elena's support and growing community backing, David prepared to take the fight beyond locked gates and whispered threats. The time for secrets was ending. The question was, would Coral Bay be ready for the truth? The community hall buzzed with an energy unlike any David had seen before. Word had spread quietly but surely. Neighbors who once stayed silent now gathered in force. The room was packed. Familiar faces, wary allies, even a few who had sided with Marsha out of fear. David stood at the front, flanked by Elena and the couple who had pledged their support. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "We have proof. Marsha has been lying to us, embezzling funds, and trying to sell off our marina without our consent." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena stepped forward, projecting calm confidence as she laid out the documents, bank statements, forged invoices, emails that exposed the web of deceit. But just as the evidence sank in, the room's tension shifted. A sudden commotion erupted at the back. Marsha herself stormed in, eyes blazing with fury. "This is libel," she shouted. "You're all being manipulated by a few disgruntled residents. I've done what's best for Coral Bay." The crowd wavered. Some looked shocked, others uncertain. Marsha's words were sharp and rehearsed, her presence commanding. David raised his hand, silencing the room. "This isn't about grudges. It's about our community's future. We deserve transparency and respect." Marsha's expression twisted. "If you think you can take this fight to court, be my guest. But know this, there will be consequences." Suddenly, a man in the crowd stepped forward, a board member who had kept silent until now. "I can confirm the evidence. I was pressured to stay quiet, but I can't stand by any longer." More neighbors began nodding, murmurs turning to voices of support. The balance was tipping. But before the meeting could proceed, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp filled the air. When the emergency lights kicked on minutes later, Marcia was gone. Panic and whispers filled the hall. Had she fled? Or was this a warning? David's mind raced. The stakes were higher than ever. This was no longer just a battle over a boat or marina. It was a fight against a corrupt power threatening to tear Coral Bay apart. As neighbors slowly dispersed, David caught Elena's eye. She nodded grimly. This isn't over. Outside, the night air was thick with uncertainty. The marina gates remained locked, and Marcia's shadow loomed large, absent, yet still very much alive. David knew one thing. The reckoning had only just begun. Days passed like a restless tide, the marina gates still locked and Coral Bay simmering with uncertainty. Marcia Leland's sudden disappearance left a void and a cloud of suspicion that hung heavy over the neighborhood. Rumors spread like wildfire. Had she fled? Was she orchestrating something more sinister from the shadows? David sat in his living room, staring at the sealed marina gates from his window. The battle had taken everything, his peace, his sense of security, but he refused to let it end in defeat. Elena's steady presence had become his anchor, and together, their coalition of neighbors grew stronger every day. One afternoon, a knock came at his door. It was Officer Ramirez from the local police, looking grave. "We found Marcia's car abandoned down by the old dock," she said quietly, but no sign of her. David's stomach twisted. The marina's dark corners suddenly felt colder. That night, as David and Elena pored over the evidence once more, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "Meet me at the marina. Midnight. Alone." His heart thundered. Was it Marcia? A trap? Or an ally with more to reveal? Curiosity and caution warred within him, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. At midnight, David slipped out and approached the marina under the pale moonlight. The gates creaked open silently, the locks expertly bypassed. Inside, shadows danced among the docks. A figure stepped forward. It was Marcia, but her face was pale, eyes haunted. "You want the truth?" she whispered. "I'm not the villain you think I am." David's breath caught. "Then what are you?" Marcia's voice trembled. "I tried to protect Coral Bay from a developer far worse than me. The secret plan I was forced into. It was a cover for something bigger. Someone above the HOA was planning to turn this entire bay into a private resort, displacing every resident. I tried to buy time, slow them down." David's mind reeled. Had he been fighting the wrong enemy? But when I realized the damage being done, I threatened to expose them. That's why I disappeared. I'm hiding to gather proof and allies. David looked at her, torn between distrust and the desperate hope for truth. "We have a choice," Marcia said, voice urgent. "Expose the real threat or lose everything." Before David could respond, headlights swept over the marina, several cars pulling up fast. Elena appeared beside him, breathless. "They found us." Chaos erupted as men in suits. The real developers stormed the docks. David, Marcia, and Elena scrambled, ducking behind boats and pilings. Amid the adrenaline, David realized this fight was bigger than neighborhood squabbles. It was a battle for their home. As dawn broke, the trio made a silent pact. Together, they would unmask the true enemy and save Coral Bay. The marina gates would open again, not just to boats, but to a community united.